Hello, everyone, and welcome to our first WAAAAN event for 2021. My name is Vidisha Behaja Patel, class of 1985, and the parent to two Eves, classes of 2018 and 2019. And I'm joining you here from Sarasota, Florida. For those of you who may not be familiar, WAAAAN is the Williams Asian and Asian American Alumni Network. Our hope is to build a community through our shared identity that supports and sustains our members professionally and personally, while also advancing the mission of Williams College. Today's program is one of a year-long series of events commemorating the 200th anniversary of the founding of the Williams College Society of Alumni. Our society is the oldest alumni association in North America and quite possibly the world. We're spending this bicentennial year not only celebrating and grappling with our past, but also examining our present and imagining our future. Together, let's envision an inclusive society where all alumni feel they belong and where we are united in our shared commitment to a liberal arts education, to lifelong learning, and most especially to each other and to our college. In this bicentennial year for the Society of Alumni, we're doubly committed to engage Asian and Asian American alumni, including our most recent graduates, and to continue to build and expand our network through creative engagement and meaningful conversation. If you're interested in joining the network or want to learn more about us, please email us at efwan@gmail.com. That's EPH1, WAAAAN@gmail.com. And now I'm going to turn it over to Nancy Ma, class of 2010, who's going to introduce our speaker.
Is it time for me to speak? Yeah? Hi, and Hannah, you already got a shout out from Brianna in the chat. I am Nancy, class of 2010, and Hannah was the first person I thought about when we were thinking of doing an event for WAAAAN around food and Chinese New Year, Lunar New Year. So I'm gonna give a very brief bio of who Hannah is, and she'll get to share more of her journey and food, which I also will be learning about the food. So Hannah graduated from Williams in 2008. And then after that, she got her Fulbright in Hong Kong. After her Fulbright, this is very liberal arts. After her Fulbright, she went to culinary school at Johnson and Wales. After culinary school, she ended up working in New York City at DB Bistro Moderne, Gramercy Tavern, and Battersby. And then in 2019, Hannah and her business partner, Ian No, started Real Food Catering, opened up Van Da, which is a modern Vietnamese restaurant that received a star from the New York Times and Michelin Guide's Bib Gourmand recognition. Those sound like very, very big awards. I'm sure they are. And right now, Hannah is working on a Brooklyn-based street food inspired restaurant called Hema, and is also the executive chef of One-to-One Foods, a social enterprise that partners with independent restaurants to create unique meal kits and contributes a portion of its revenue to local food relief efforts. So really, Hannah does it all. That's what I just showed. And today, she's gonna demonstrate how to prepare hand-pulled noodles, which are also called lamian in Chinese. So Lunar New Year was a few weeks ago, and noodles are traditionally served to symbolize a long life ahead, which would be great, especially at a time like now. So I'm gonna hand it over to Hannah to do your thing and take over she's the main course now.
Thank you, Nancy. It's really amazing. I just was quickly flipping through all the people that I've seen so far who are joining us today, and it's just amazing to see so many familiar names and names that I really haven't seen in over a decade. So I thank you so much for joining me today. My name is Hannah, and I do want to get into talking a little bit more, sharing about my journey from Williams to where I am now with you. But the first thing I want to do is make sure that everyone has their dough ready and that their dough is looking good. So I did ask people if they were able to make your dough ahead of time, but I really quickly just want to demo the kneading process for this dough because it is something that's unique to this dish. Obviously it's called hand-pulled noodles, and just very quickly, so I have my dough, I asked people to sort of roll it out into about a 1 foot log. So this is my 1 foot log. But I'm very quickly just going to go over how I got this log from the ball of flour that I had, flour and water that I had at the beginning. And the other thing I want to mention, if you were able to find nutritional yeast, that was kind of a special ingredient, like a sort of a little trick that I found on the World Wide Web. But there is a protein in nutritional yeast that allows that when it interacts with gluten, actually relaxes the gluten. And so it allows you to work with this dough right after you make it, instead of as with like a pasta dough, when you add your water to your flour and you knead it, you have to let it rest, right, for like an hour or so in order to get it relaxed enough so that you can work with it. The yeast in this dough is what allows you to work with it right away. It doesn't hurt to rest it though. So that's why I had, if people are able to make it ahead of time and have it resting so that it's ready to go. But I'm going to very quickly just demo this sort of traditional process of the kneading. Just make some space. So if you ever go to a hand-pulled noodle shop, sometimes you'll hear this like slapping, and that's what they're doing when they're stretching out their dough. And then they kind of do this thing, they twirl, and they put it back on the counter. You roll it out a little bit. So if you were able to, I had written this in the instructions. It might have been hard to follow along just, with the words. So if you want to play around with your dough a little bit, you can try this right now. We can all take a few minutes. And like I said, because of the yeast in the dough, even if you're working with it, you're playing around with it right now, you'll still be able to use it in 5-10 minutes. I'm just gonna do this one more time. So what I'm doing really is rolling it out and pressing. So I am using a lot of force. I'm using my body and really leaning into the counter, and then just getting the dough to a rope that's about my wingspan, and then giving it a little twirl. So now all your gluten proteins are sort of in a very strong rope like that. And you want your gluten to be working linearly versus a pasta dough, which when you knead it by hand or in a machine, it's sort of like a circular random gluten development. The way that we're using our table and hands to knead by hand develops the gluten in a way that's like very linear. And so when you're pulling your noodles, that's what helps with the stretchiness and the chewiness. So yeah, it's all good stuff. So I'm just got distracted. And the great thing about this dough too, it's like putty. So your dough really should feel like putty. If it doesn't, please raise your hand. We can spotlight you. We can try and fix it right away before you move on.
What if it looks like Play-Doh?
Play-Doh, yeah, putty, Play-Doh, that kind of thing. Have any dough questions?
Is it possible to overstretch or overwork the dough?
You'd have to really, no. Okay. It'd be really hard to. And if you feel like your dough is getting too worked up, I would just let it rest for 10-20 minutes. And I think you'll find that it just relaxes.
And some people have some dry dough. Do you have any suggestions, or it's not coming together?
Add more water.
You're the expert.
Yeah, if it's a little, so I don't know if my dough if you can really see the texture of it, but it is not dry at all. It's a smooth sort of like putty kind of texture. It works into itself really easily. So after I braid it and I roll it out, it just becomes like a uniform mass again. I'm seeing some questions. I don't know.
Yeah, do you have time to do that? I'm butchering the twirl, the twist, the momentum of that.
Yeah, for sure. So if you have a 1 inch or a 1 foot long log, or even if you have a ball, just sort of like roll it out into a log shape. And then I'm pushing and rolling the log to make it longer. So this is both working the gluten in the log and stretching it out. And then I'm kind of bouncing it on the table. That helps me stretch it without tearing. And then I twirl it to further strengthen the gluten development in this sort of linear way. And then I'm sort of like flattening the log on the table in order to like make the log a single sort of like coherent piece of dough again.
Did you flour your counter?
I didn't actually flour it. So if you notice, there's a little bit of oil in the dough, and that really just helps it from sticking to surfaces. But you can flour your surface a little bit. You can also oil it. But yeah, if you're having a dry dough, this dough is definitely not dry. So if you have a dough that's not really coming together, I think maybe add water by like the tablespoon until it starts coming together. I find also that if you did use a machine to mix your dough, sometimes the pasta hook on the machines are not great at like getting everything together in the beginning. So yeah, if you have been working with your dough, I'm just gonna put mine aside for a little bit and let it rest. And also feel free to continue practicing. I'm just going to share a little bit at this time. Also, if you have if you don't yet have a pot of water on your stove, I would go and get that on so that it comes to a boil. So while you're practicing your dough kneading, I'm just going to share a little bit about my journey from Williams in 2008 to 2021 here in Brooklyn. After I graduated from Williams, as Nancy said, I spent a year in Hong Kong on a Fulbright scholarship teaching English. And basically that was me not being ready to enter the real world. And so I took a little escape. And after I came back from Hong Kong, I worked in Cambridge. I was working actually in academic publishing because I thought I wanted to go to grad school. As I mentioned, I studied English at Williams, and so I moved to Cambridge, Massachusetts. I worked in publishing for 2 years, hated it, realized I didn't have the brain for it, just could not be in an office all day. And while I was living in Cambridge, I started working part-time at a restaurant called Bergamot. And I just fell in love very quickly with the pace and the environment, the energy and the attention to detail and the like love of the craft in the kitchen. And so that inspired me to apply to culinary school. So I ended up going to Johnson & Wales in Providence. And after I obtained my degree there, I moved to New York City, and I've been working here since 2012. Worked at a few restaurants, worked in catering, did some events, and just tried to get a breadth of experience that I thought would benefit me in the future with my own goal of opening a restaurant, which is what I was in the process of doing last year. Nancy mentioned the restaurant concept is called Hema. It's a Asian street food inspired concept. And I was in the middle of signing a lease last March when COVID shut down New York, and as it did most of the world. And so it really didn't make sense for me to move forward with the lease, obviously, given all of the uncertainty around what was happening, not just in our lives, but specific to my industry. And so I made a pretty difficult decision in the middle of last summer to just sort of hold off on my own business plans and try and focus my energy on other things that I could, which I will get into after we start pulling our noodles, because our dough is now rested for a few more minutes and I think it should be okay to work with. And make sure your water is boiling if you have not started that already.
Hannah, we did have a couple quick questions. Someone was saying that their dough feels like it's toughening the more they work with it, and if you have any suggestions for that.
Yeah, resting. Is that person, can we spotlight whoever that is so I can take a look at the dough?
So I want to say that's Clark. I will. There we go.
Hi, Clark. I can't quite see.
It just like seems like it's getting tougher the more I do it. And then it was stretching at the beginning and now it won't stretch out.
Okay, I think it probably just needs to rest for a little bit. Does it have the nutritional yeast in there?
Yes.
Okay, great. Yeah, so I think it just needs a couple more minutes, and we'll be doing this noodle pulling for like 15, 20 minutes. So don't worry about missing this part. You'll let your dough rest for like 10 minutes and then you can jump in.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Hannah, do we need to put salt in the water?
I did not salt my water because there's salt in the dough, and also the seasoning is like quite aggressive in the sauce.
And how big of a pot of water should folks be boiling?
I have like a 2-quart pot, so like a regular soup pot for this. I think it was the 1 serving size that I put in the recipe card. So that should be good for about 2 people. So if you have your rested log of dough, I'm gonna cut mine into, let's say 4 pieces. So just 1, 2, 3, 4. So you should have 4 mini logs.
Okay, can you substitute balsamic for vinegar?
You can substitute a little bit, yeah, or rice vinegar or like lemon juice. Yeah. Yeah, we're not too rigid. So I've got 4 pieces of dough, and I'm just gonna start working with 1 at a time, obviously. So with a small piece of dough, I'm just gonna flatten it by hand. I'm gonna flatten it by hand. Can you angle this down a little bit? Yeah. So that I have a flat sort of rectangular shape. And then I'm gonna pull this flapping down on the table, just nice and gentle, or else it will tear. I'm sort of holding the dough with my thumbs, like pressed gently against the ends, because I don't want my thumbs to sort of like tear the dough at the end. So once I have it to about here, it takes a little bit of trial and error to, so I'm gonna fold this up. Sorry, I'm starting one sentence and not finishing it and moving on to another sentence. And I'm gonna gently flap this out and stretch it a little bit more. So this is my first noodle that I have. And the thickness, obviously it's a personal preference how thick you want it. This to me is like pretty nice. It still has, I know I'm gonna cook this for maybe 30 seconds. But I know it will still be chewy after that. You can also play around, and the thing with like hand pulled noodles, especially when you're doing it at home, it's like super rustic, and not all of your noodles are going to be you know, like even thickness, and that's okay. Like this is, we're at home, we're just like making food for our families and having a good time. So the important thing with these noodles though is after you stretch them, if you don't flour them, you need to cook them right away because they will start sticking to things, they'll start sticking back together. The other cool thing is I'm kind of like, I think I messed this up. So what I'm gonna do is just like start over. And that's the other reason why having the nutritional yeast in the dough is so amazing, is because you could just keep practicing with the same piece of dough. It'll stretch out. If you're feeling a little resistance, just like throw it away or throw it to the side and let it rest, let it hang out, and then start working with it again. So this is the same piece of dough. Oh, I'm getting away. Flattening it. So you want a flat rectangle, and then you're just flapping it on the table. And I can feel like for sure that it's starting to resist me a little bit. It just tore off a little bit. So I'm gonna put this guy aside because he's not very happy right now, and just let him hang out and rest, and use another piece of dough that I have. So if you all should have 4 pieces of dough that you can work with, and you can just start trying to pull it. So again, flat rectangle. And make sure you're gently bouncing on the table. Not too thin, don't want it to tear. That looks like a pretty good thickness. If you want to cook the noodles right now, I would flour them a little bit. Where's my flour? And you could just sort of have them hanging out here while you move on to your other noodles. Does that make sense? So this guy just has a little bit of flour on him. Everything.
So will folks be cooking the noodles after this pulling?
Yeah, you can, if your water is up, you can, as soon as you're finished pulling your noodles, you can drop them right into the water. And you want to cook them for about 30 seconds to a minute, depending on the thickness. When you pull them out, you don't have to rinse them. Just put them in a mixing bowl that you want to mix all of your other ingredients in. And then we can sort of meet there. Why don't we do that? So everyone take your time practicing with the noodles. Please throw out questions in the chat if you have questions about how to cook them.
So what if folks don't want to cook it right away? Do they flour the noodles or do they wait?
If you don't want to eat the noodles right away, I would either cook them and then cool them down and just reheat them very quickly later, or I wouldn't pull them at all. With this noodle recipe, you really should be cooking the dough or cooking the noodles as you're pulling them. They don't really hold the same way that pasta dough does. They don't really dry out in the same way in the freezer. So yeah, this is really a fresh noodle sort of situation.
Cool. And there's a few things about nutritional yeast.
Yep.
Can you talk more about that? How that's part of the recipe, what it does?
Yes, for sure. Sorry, I've got a noodle in the pool. Nutritional yeast, it's a little bit of a hack for hand-pulled noodles. I'm gonna actually also keep pulling while we're chatting about nutritional yeast. So again, flat, rectangle. It's a little bit of a hack. So for hand-pulled noodles that are made in China, when I did my research, I read that there's a chemical that people add to the noodle dough in order to make it very pliable in the way that this dough should be. That chemical is not available in the US. And so I saw a bunch of people trying to find a replacement, and it turns out nutritional yeast does approximate that kind of effect of the chemical that is used. So I'm gonna drop this guy into the water too, about 30 seconds.
Do you know what the chemical is called that the Chinese?
I don't know the name of the chemical. I don't know off the top of my head, unfortunately. The other thing I forgot to mention is after you pull your noodles out of the water, since we're gonna sort of wait for everyone to get to the same point, I'm just gonna add a little bit of sesame oil or like chili, whatever, like neutral oil, just so that the noodles, it doesn't stick together. How are people looking with their noodles? I would love to see some
Yeah,
noodles. So this is like my finished
wow.
product. This one looks really good. This came out really good. But you can see like the texture of my noodle, it's not all even. It's a little like thinner in some places. It's a little thicker, like where my palm or my thumb was. But this is like rustic. So for me, this is perfect.
Can you use the same dough to make thinner noodles?
Yes, you can. It's a different pulling process, but it's the same dough. And I also have used this dough to make scallion pancakes. So this dough is, and dumpling wrappers. So this dough is very versatile. And it has really good flavor actually from the nutritional yeast. Are there any more questions about this? Or are people actually cooking their noodles right now? Or are we still, where is the audience at?
I think people are making the noodles or like trying to stretch it.
Yeah.
There's some tear, like it's tearing up. Some are tearing at the ends. I wish I was in every kitchen.
So that's what I was saying with the ends. Just make sure you're holding very gently and your thumbs aren't like pressing into the dough. You want to sort of be holding it like with the size of your thumbs. Like that. So my thumbs are not really pressing into the ends. I'm using the like sides of my fingers, I guess.
And so when you drop in the water, you just leave it in the water for 30 seconds?
Yeah, 30 seconds to a minute. You can like test it. But like, you know, this is not perfect by any stretch. So the dough can tear up. If it does, you can either just roll it back into a ball or start over, or just, you know, I can live with this kind of thing, but you know, that tear, that's okay for me. I'm less of a perfectionist than I used to be.
And Hannah, if you didn't want to cook all of the noodles right away, how would you go about storing the not pulled dough?
Just store your dough. Just don't even roll out the dough or pull out the dough until you want to make your noodles. How long can you store the dough? You know, and also someone just asked me how long you can store the dough for. I've used it like a couple days after I've made it. I think it's been fine. I think it's a little bit like pasta dough in that sense. I usually use it between 2 and 3 days after I make it. Okay, so while everyone is pulling their noodles, and I'm really sorry if people are having like lots of trouble with pulling. The dough is very sticky. It can be very sticky. So if you're experiencing a little difficulty with that, I would just add a little bit of flour to your surface as you're slapping and pulling. That should help. You definitely, yeah, and you want to keep the dough moving too, because it does have a tendency to stick to the surface of the counter. So keep it moving, add your flour if you need it, cook it right away. And when you pull it out of the water, just hit it with a splash of sesame oil or something like that. I have one more to do too. So while yep.
Someone's noodles are falling apart when they come out of the water.
Oh, okay, that's probably because they might be too thin or too uneven when they've been pulled. If you're having a lot of like shredding, that's probably what it is. And if you're using regular flour, if you are using all-purpose flour, you're gonna have a lot of trouble with this dough because, and in the future, I would actually recommend if you're using all-purpose flour to knead it a lot longer, because the reason why I use bread flour is because of the high gluten content in the bread flour. It's specifically for, It's specifically for this kind of function of like bread and pasta, and so it contains a higher amount of gluten and protein in the dough, which makes it stronger, basically. So if you're getting a lot of that shredding because you're using all-purpose flour, I think that might be part of it. Drop a little sesame oil.
And how do you know when the noodle is done cooking?
You can take a bite into it. It should. Usually, that's like. If I tear it, like I might. It's kind of like pasta dough. I like my noodles al dente, but I also. So what I'm looking for when I tear it is just like a little bit of just. It's hard to see, but I can tell that there's like just a little bit. The center is like a little bit less translucent than the rest of it. Like these noodles, you can see the color. Once it gets translucent, obviously it's cooked. The middle, it just looks a little bit less, it looks a little bit more opaque to me. But like, you know, if I taste it and I think it's like, oh, I'm still tasting raw flour, I'll just throw it back in the, in the water. So trial and error is how you decide whether it's done or not.
We had someone, Kate Tan, whose dough isn't stretching, is willing to come on up for a spotlight for help. Would you be cool with that?
Yeah, for sure. And just as a heads up, I just tasted my dough, and I think the salt level is actually perfect. So that is why I would not add, I would not salt the water that you're cooking it in. Hi.
Hello. Our dough seems to love to have holes in it.
Right. So is this bread flour with the nutritional yeast?
Yes, bread flour, nutritional yeast, weighed salt, all that.
Can I see the rest of your dough? Do you have another piece that
Certainly.
Okay, well that looks pretty good. So can you try, is that about half of the portion of the serving?
That's a quarter.
Okay, so
here's another.
Yeah, so when you're there, can you try, can you put your camera on the board as you're stretching it so we can see what's happening as you're stretching it?
I'll hold it. I'll hold it.
I think we're okay. Oh, it was.
She wants you to slap it.
What about, can we try a different piece of dough? So the one that you got, that's the cylinder. Yeah, that one.
Yeah.
Yeah, so let's start from there. This is great. This is like a live like demo from
you're just getting my hands. Maybe just turn the camera around and then you can actually see what you're pointing to.
Does the dough feel like Play-Doh? Does it feel like putty? It looks a little tough. And
it's a little tough.
Has it been resting?
It has been resting maybe 30 minutes. It feels a little tough here.
Yeah, it doesn't really come apart when you slap it.
Yeah. Are you trying to pull as you are slapping the table? Oh,
Yes.
Yeah, so can you actually do both of those things at the same time, like pull and slap? But it looks
not well. I mean, demonstrably, I cannot do these things well.
Yeah, you know what? I'm going to be honest. It should be easier to do it than that. So I wonder if it's a resting issue or if the ratio, like if your dough also looks a little dry. And at this point, it's a little bit hard to add water into the dough. So, I can see the way that your dough is tearing like in the middle. Also, it's probably because you didn't maybe you didn't oil it or wrap it in plastic while you were storing it. I can see like the pock marks. That's from it looks like that might just be from the dough drying out a little bit.
Yeah. Okay. Well, we're gonna then pause and watch the rest of the show because this looks insane. Like
Thank you so much
unsavable. Is that
for
correct?
your being vulnerable and having the spotlight on you guys. Does anyone, Nancy, do you want to quickly see if anyone else is having major issues?
Yeah.
Is anyone feeling successful? Like they've done this
Give
successfully?
a little emoji in the chat or like a thumbs up. Ooh, Brianna, you have a chemistry question.
Oh God. I didn't major in chemistry.
Sarah is cooking. Patrick's are going great. That's right. Yana, third one was awesome. Susan, feeling successful. Go.
Awesome.
Yeah, Wendy. Looks eatable.
So just quickly, while people are finishing their cooking and pulling, and again, apologies if this did not work out for you this time. It did take me several weeks of doing this trial and error to like get everything the way I wanted it to. And a lot of this, again, like with bread dough and pasta dough, a lot of working with dough is just like learning the feel of things. So it's a little bit, it's just a thing that you will absolutely get better at with practice, being able to feel like when a dough needs more water, when it is too tight and needs a rest, when the thickness of your noodles are like where you want it to be, like the way you pull it so that it's even and doesn't shred. These are all things that are just, and this is part of like why I really like cooking, is because I think it's just like a very physical, it's a lot about your physicality, being in tune with your body, sensory things like, or just, you know, timing things. Like I know that I put noodles there, I didn't time it, but I'm like, I think it's done. So cooking is very intuitive for me, and that's part of what I really enjoy about it, which is all to say, if I can get my noodles out of the fire, that if it didn't work out this time, there's hope.
That's a metaphor for life.
So I've got my batch of noodles cooked. I'm just gonna leave it here to the side while people are finishing up.
Can we see your cooked noodles?
Sure can. It's not in the plating bowl yet, but I can hold this up to you. So this is just the noodles that came out of the water with some sesame oil. So not perfect by any stretch, like you can see a huge hole over there, but I don't know, looks pretty tasty. So, but yeah, the thickness I would say that I was trying to go for is about 1 inch thick, or 1 inch wide, 1 inch wide. But if you like them thinner or thicker, like obviously that is totally your call. Like this guy looks pretty good too. It's a little wider. So while people are finishing that up very quickly, I just want to talk a little bit about what I've been sort of brought you through my journey to last year when quarantine happened in New York. And so after I decided not to open my restaurant, I sort of pivoted, as a lot of people did. And I think with all of the protests that were happening over the summer after the murder of George Floyd and so many others, it really just became imperative to think about the ways in which racism and inequity were rampant in my industry. And so a lot of the thinking and the work that I've been doing for the last year, I guess now, has revolved around trying to, when I think about moving forward, what my own business model would look like, I think I've been doing a lot of research and work with mutual aid groups and thinking about how to build community through a public space, how to make it accessible for people. I think when people talk to me about HEMA and what it means for me, it's always the kind of thing, I talk a lot about how I want it to be a community-driven restaurant. It's both a personal expression for me of my life experience through food, and also this, I think, project of building a space that is very much exists in a specific neighborhood with a specific group of people that I'm trying to connect with. And so for me, I think a lot of this last year has been trying to think through how to balance both like the personal identity and expression of food through the restaurant, and also this sense of like building community. And with building community, I just want to quickly spotlight two organizations that I am really excited to have been working with over the last year. The first is Heart of Dinner, which maybe some of you have heard of. Heart of Dinner is an initiative started by my dear friends Moonlin and Yin, who are romantic partners. And at the beginning of March last year, when they were hearing news stories about Asian American elderly people being ostracized and attacked, they had a sort of a supper club concept that they quickly turned into this food relief program. And so I think recently they've just surpassed like 50,000 meals, which is mind-blowing, but they've really been able to, I'm deeply in admiration of the way that they've been able to just like rally people so quickly and so effectively, and with so much care to this cause that they feel so strongly about. And I think also with I think probably most people have heard of the last wave of attacks against targeting Asian American elderly. And there is now, and I think we're all experiencing sort of like a renewed sense of, and a renewed urgency around making sure that these vulnerable people are provided for. And the second initiative that I would love to highlight is the Level Up Project, which was started last year by woodworker, designer, furniture maker Allison Samuels, who's based in Brooklyn. And the initiative is, it's an informal network really of professionals, makers, people with decision-making power in their respective industries, focusing on certain fields of craft and design that have traditionally, systemically been difficult for people of color, gender non-conforming individuals to enter. And so the Level Up Project offers workshops, physical skills-based workshops, and also business-oriented workshops using a redistributive tiered pricing model. So that means if you want to attend the workshop for free, you are able to at no cost. We provide materials if you request them. And we also ask that if you are able to pay for these workshops, that you pay considering the privileges that you have experienced in your life. And so we offer a little bit of education around what redistributive pricing is, what the tiered pricing model looks like, how you can reflect on your privileges in a way that translates into how many dollars you think you can spend on something like this. I think Nancy is going to drop the links in the chat before the end of this event, and I would really love it if you had a chance to log on to these websites and just poke around. They're both taking donations. They're both, Heart of Dinner is a not-for-profit organization, and Level Up is entirely volunteer-based. So I'm sure these folks could really use your money if you feel so compelled to. And on that note, I would love to finish up this dish so that we can plate it. Hopefully more people have cooked noodles.
And if anyone here has any questions not related to cooking for Hannah, feel free to drop them in the chat as well.
We had some folks asking if all-purpose flour made all hope lost. Is there any insight to that?
Yeah, and yes, I should have specified, like when I did not actually think about, when I put bread flour in the recipe, I did not consider the like contingency plan for people who would not be able to access. But this, yes, this dough is it's pretty important that you have the nutritional yeast and the bread flour together. If you don't have one or the other, it's not really going to work. Anyway, so I have my cooked noodles in this bowl. I'm just gonna quickly show you what else I have, which hopefully you guys have some of. This little container has my mix of spices. So we have cumin, coriander seeds, and Szechuan peppercorns. I also have minced garlic, ginger, and a little bit of cilantro stems because I have them here. Oh, and chili flakes. So that's that. I have a little bit of chili oil just in case I want more spice. This is my sauce mix. So this is the soy sauce and the vinegar. That is really gonna flavor the noodles. Got a ton of scallions I just chopped up. A lot of cilantro, rough chopped with the stems. Don't trust anyone who doesn't eat cilantro stems. And then I have just greens that I found at the market. I think they're turnip greens. And they're not cooked. If you want to saute them very quickly and just add it into your dish, if you prefer that. I kind of like having a like crunchy bitter green for this dish. And then I just have some fried shallots because who doesn't like fried shallots? Okay, so I have my noodles. Oh, and the other thing I'm going to do is heat up a little bit of vegetable oil in a pan, maybe like 2 tablespoons. And that when it's smoking, it's going to go over the spices and the garlic just to sort of aromatize the dish and like get the spice, like wake them up a little bit.
Are you going to talk a little bit more about like the spice seed mix, or was that like your intuition?
I mean, the Szechuan peppercorn is pretty traditional for this. I think it's called like biang sauce. So it's just like very pungent and assertive. But I think it's pretty traditional to combine like some mixture of Szechuan, cumin, coriander, black pepper.
I think they meant repeat. So was that at Szechuan, coriander?
Szechuan peppercorn, coriander seeds, and cumin seeds. And then also I have chili flakes.
Okay. Which was your favorite English class or prof at Williams?
Favorite English class? Honestly, Nancy, it was so long ago. But I mean, I really enjoyed all of my classes that included like mid 20th century literature, because that is what I ended up studying or doing a thesis on. But yeah, I'm sorry, I don't have a better answer.
Yeah, no, and
I can tell you what I've been reading for the last 10 years, but I cannot really recall that much about my English classes at Williams. I think my oil is almost smoking, but in my bowl, I'm going to add, and this is probably a serving for 2 people. I'm going to add my spice mix on top, my scallions. I can hear my oil popping, so that means it's getting close. My scallions. And that's it for right now, actually.
How did you wake up the spices in the oil?
Oh, so this is what we're gonna do right now. So I just put the spices in here. And once my oil is hot, I'm gonna pour it over the spices. It's just gonna, like everything's gonna sizzle. It's gonna cook a little bit. I'm gonna give it like 30 more seconds.
And another random question. Can the folks who had the non-bread flour dough use their dough to make scallion pancakes?
Yes, you can, absolutely. Okay, we have 10 minutes. If people want to hang on for a little bit, at the end, I can do a very quick scallion pancake demo, like very quick. But yes, that's like a great way, or you can use it for like dumpling dough or something like that.
Oh, double demo.
I want it to not sizzle. Is there maybe one more question I can answer while my oil is heating up?
You know, you've transitioned through a lot of industries and even having to transition and be flexible with the pandemic. Can you talk a little bit more about that? Was there any like self-doubt or the feelings? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, for sure. I think I talk a lot, or I've told a lot of people about how I felt like I had imposter syndrome for most of last year because I wasn't really cooking. And I think like a lot of people had sort of like a mini professional identity crisis when the thing that you're used to doing, you know, for 70, 80 hours a week, which is something that defines you so like integrally, is so key to your identity, is just like not there. I think like a lot of people, I struggled for a long time to figure out how I was going to move forward in a way that wasn't prescribed, because there was no more, you know, there was nothing else for me. The industry, I think the hospitality industry has just been completely demolished. And so I think we're all needing to figure out new ways of doing things. And, you know, that is a huge challenge. It's also an incredible opportunity, especially for someone like myself who wants to be very intentional about the way that I structure my own business and create my own business priorities and the ways that I choose to spend money, or, you know, build relationships or do outreach to the community. So for sure, like a lot more pivots than I think I've was expecting, but also I absolutely this last year with the amount of time that I've been able to spend educating myself on business practices and mutual aid, I think I definitely at least feel like I'm in a better position, even though I don't know exactly when a restaurant is going to become available to me. At least I feel like I'm in a better position to take advantage of that opportunity. Did I answer your question? Okay, so I got some really hot oil. I don't know if you guys can see it's wafting a little smoke. And I'm gonna pour it into my bowl of noodles, and I'm gonna make sure I'm getting it onto the spices. And I'm not going to talk because I want to, like, if you guys can hear that sizzle when it hits we're a little over the scallions. It was about 2 tablespoons. Did you hear this? And then I'm gonna spoon in a little bit of sauce. I'm gonna do that much for now. Maybe like 3 tablespoons. You can always add more, can't take away. I'm gonna add my cilantro and some of my turnip greens. I'm just gonna tear these up. This is very rustic. Okay. I need a double chopstick. And then I think I'm just gonna add a little chili oil too, because also it's just like a gorgeous color. So I'm just gonna show this to the camera so you can see sort of like what it looks like, the colors, the texture. It smells like incredible. And because we didn't rinse the noodles after they were cooked, there's still like quite a bit of starch. So that's kind of my final product. as you can see, it's glistening with the sauce. There's a little bit of sauce pooling at the bottom, so I'm gonna just keep mixing it. But because we didn't rinse the noodles after we cooked it in the pasta in the water, there's still starch, like sort of like coating the outside. So it's actually doing a really good job of picking up the liquid sauce. That is it. I can plate it because we have these gorgeous ceramic plates. And I would love to see any like last shots, if we have a second, of people who've plated successful hand-pulled noodles. If anyone is brave enough to share.
While we look for some of those, we got, I think, a couple quick questions for you, Hannah.
Yeah.
One, what is your favorite thing you've eaten? I think that is a really, really fun question.
I've eaten so many of these in the last month that it just hasn't gotten old yet. So I would say this is definitely up there. My noodles are so long. You know what this means though, long life. This is great. 2021 looks very promising.
Say that again.
And what were some of your inspirations and influences to go into the hospitality industry?
So I think it was definitely partly the work that I was doing part-time at this restaurant in Cambridge. And also I think I've sort of glossed over when I was living in Asia after college. I did a lot of traveling in Southeast Asia and really fell in love with street food culture there, and the flavors. And I think those two things, a combination of like really loving and just feeling like very naturally drawn into the environment, the work environment, and the intensity of it, and then also just being inspired by the traveling that I was able to do as an adult, which is, I just had never really traveled internationally as a child. And so I like always had the sense that I would just like fall in love with Southeast Asia. And I did, but I just wasn't able to until I was an adult. And so I think a lot of people that I meet in the culinary world, like they are people who have picked this up as a second career. And so I actually feel like in a lot of ways, I feel like sometimes it's a struggle to keep up with people like young guns who are just out of culinary school and like 21 and don't have like 15-year like older knees. But I think there's also a lot of people who have entered this industry coming off of working in finance or like in science. And so it's just it's like a diverse, I found that in New York, at least, there's a pretty diverse range of people that I've met in the industry. So that's been really rewarding. I feel like I'm not alone. One of my, someone that I've become close to, we used to work at Gramercy together. His name is Eric. He now does a Chinese fried chicken pop-up out of Queens, but we kind of bonded because he went to Northwestern. He was an accomplished cellist and was thinking about pursuing cello professionally, and then just fell in love with cooking in the same way that I did. So we bond over that. Okay, I'm done plating. I think we're right on time.
Yeah, no, you're right on
And
time.
I'm just gonna do this because crispy shallots. And that's what it is. But I hope everyone who was able to finish their dishes is able to enjoy them.
Yeah,
Do we want to do a Scallion pancake demo, or are we out of time?
No, I just want to be mindful of the time, but we'll do a quick transition before we go into Scallion Pancakes. Because we just wanted to say thank you for taking the time to do this, showing a food demo over Zoom. That was incredible. And this is going to be recorded, so people will get that. And if you want to try it again with the right flour or right oil, or even try it, you can. So we just want to say thank you, Hannah, for giving us a yes for this. And thank you for Alumni Relations for putting this up. It means a lot that you're spotlighting WAAAN and really making sure to highlight alumni that are doing great work. And there's going to be a ton of other Bicentennial events. So for everyone who came here, hopefully you can join the other ones. They're pretty incredible. So all that will be on the website and come through emails. So we'll drop some links to the organizations that you mentioned again in the chat. And then we can stay for a few to do the Scallion pancake demo. If there's anything I missed out, feel free to jump in, Michael, Kate, thank you.
And I think if people don't want to stay for the demo, they can just, yeah. Thank you so much for joining. Have a great evening or afternoon, wherever you are. Okay, just gonna go right ahead and start. I'm like, might be a little rusty with this pancake, but I think we'll see. All right, so I've got my dough. And I think let's do the same. So I'm gonna, since I don't really know where everyone is at, I'm just going to show you how I would make scallion pancakes with this dough, and then hopefully that is helpful for people to figure it out. So. I think I'm gonna, so I cut it about the same size as I did for the, you're going to need a rolling pin for this, I think. I'm gonna do my best, which I don't have, but I am going to do my best. What I want to do is get my dough as flat as possible in a bit of like a rectangle shape. And again, this dough is great because it's so easy to work with. I'm just gonna occasionally just make sure it's not sticking, which it shouldn't, because there's quite a bit of oil in the dough. And I'm actually finding that this is pretty easy to do. I'm using the palm of my hand and kind of like spreading out the dough that way. Kind of starting to see like it's a thin, you want it to be a little bit translucent when you hold it to the light. It's not quite even yet, so I'm gonna do this a little bit more. So I kind of have like a rectangle-ish thing. Looks a little bit like an alien. But I have some scallion, you know, before that, I'm gonna add a little bit of sesame oil. Can you point that down? Yeah. I'm just gonna add a little bit of sesame oil over the top of the dough and coat it, just spread it out a little bit. And then I'm gonna add my scallions. Just a layer, even layer. And then what I'm gonna do with this flat piece of dough is roll it, start from the side that's closest to me and sort of roll it up like you're, I don't know, like making cinnamon rolls or something. And you don't really have to be too precious about this, but what you're trying to accomplish here is starting to create some layers so that your scallion pancakes will be like really flaky. It's working pretty well.
Is that toasted sesame oil?
Yes, it is. Yeah, it's pretty dark. All right, so I almost have a little roll, a little log. Okay. Then what I'm gonna do from here is make a little snail. So I'm starting from one edge and I'm just rolling the log onto itself. So now I have a little circle with a lot of layers. And what you can do with this is roll it out to the thickness that you want and just pan fry it. Or not even roll it out, just smush it out with your hands, apparently. So I think about that thick. Very easy. Same dough.
Oh my
Pretty
God. What?
I was very aggressive with the scallions, so they're coming out, but also the sesame oil that you use to coat the pancake before you roll it up. That's also what creates flakiness, because that the fat in between the layers of dough, yeah, it's just sort of like butter in a croissant or something like that.
Could you use sesame oil instead of neutral tasting oil in the noodle dough recipe?
Yeah, the noodle dough recipe is in the dough, it is a neutral oil, so grapeseed or canola. And then if you want to toss the noodles in a neutral oil after you cook it, that's totally fine too. Yeah.
But can you use a sesame oil instead of the neutral tasting?
Oh, I see. Wait, instead of nutritional yeast?
Neutral tasting oil, like the grapeseed.
You know, I wouldn't, just because I would be concerned about how overwhelming it would be. And also I think I prefer to add sesame oil, like not really to cook with it. I use it more to finish things with, like a finishing oil, or like an oil that you would add to like a dumpling sauce, or, you know, something that serves without being cooked. But I mean, I think if you really love the flavor of sesame, like go for it. I think the dough should respond the same way. So if you like really want the flavor of sesame in your dough, like, yeah, absolutely.
And you got some applause in the chat. I hope you saw that.
With the bonus cooking demo.
And the whole thing, that and all of it.
Well, I really appreciate everyone taking the extra time. Oh, in case if you made this and you want to cook it, I think cast iron is best, or like a non-stick, whatever. Just put a little oil in, get it medium high heat. You want your oil to be like, it should be moving like it's hot, maybe a little smoky, and then you just cook it maybe 2 to 3 minutes on each side. Just like be careful it doesn't burn. And then you can also, actually, this is great. You can also, we're going full circle. You can also use the noodle sauce. That can kind of be like a scallion pancake sauce too. So you could add like minced ginger or garlic, scallion, whatever, and a little bit of sesame oil into this base noodle sauce. And just use that as your scallion pancake sauce too, or your dumpling sauce.
Great. So I just wanted to echo all the thanks we had earlier. This has been wonderful, Hannah. It's been a real pleasure. And thanks to the 100 some odd folks that have stuck around to this extra part. It's been a lot of fun. And we'll definitely be looking forward to having lots of great WAAAAN events and other Bicentennial programs. So we'll wrap it up there. And again, thank you so much, Hannah. This has been great.
Awesome. Is there a WAAAAN hashtag that people can use if they're posting on social media or anything like that?
I don't know if there's a WAAAAN hashtag, but we do have the Williams College Williams 200, I think is what our hashtag is, that we've been using for Bicentennial programming. So you can definitely plug that, and that'll end up on social media, as Kate just dropped down there.
Awesome.
That's a really good idea. Thanks. Yeah, we'll get a hashtag. We're gonna create a hashtag.
Thank you so much for hosting.
Our pleasure. And so we've got just one final slide as folks head on out. So thanks again, Hannah.